What's up guys? How are you doing? How are you? Welcome to a new video for my channel. Today, I bring you the 7 best Pokemon ROM hacks for GBA that you absolutely have to try, since you can play them on PC, Android, and several other platforms. Some feature new stories and several regions, others with mega evolutions and other mechanics, and many others with several new enemy teams, so I don't... In the number 7 spot, I bring you Pokemon Super Glaze. For those who don't know it, it's an improved version of Pokemon Glaze. The only drawback of this title is that it is not completely in Spanish. The game brings us 4 regions, 2 of which are known to us and 2 others that are completely new, created by the creator of this hack. This generates a feeling of quite unique and fun exploration, since we will have a lot of world to explore, and besides that, we will have Pokemon up to the 8th generation. So if you ever played Pokemon Glazed, you will realize that the legendary hunting in this title is quite fun and innovative, since it contains almost all the legendaries available to date. Graphically, the game doesn't stand out too much, since the graphics themselves are quite common. This obviously speaking of the Game Boy Advance emulator, but in my opinion, graphically it is not ugly at all. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that the game brings new starters and mega evolutions in combat, besides also adding the Gigamax form. Historically, it really stands out a lot, since the story of Pokemon Glazed is a complete madness. So yes, it could be considered a completely new story if you haven't played Pokemon Glazed. Therefore, reviewing everything, the game features new regions, a new story, Pokemon up to the 8th generation, and mega evolutions in combat, in addition to also adding the Gigamax form. Personally, I recommend it 100%, since it is a totally new experience in Pokemon games. So without much more to say, let's move on to the next title of today's video. In the number 6 spot, we have Pokemon Said. In this game, contrary to the previous one, it takes place in the Johto region and brings graphics in the style of the 5th generation on the GBA emulator, which in my... The game has a quite creative and fun story to discover, which, along with the mega evolutions it also brings, makes the adventure much better. I think honestly the only negative thing about this game is that it doesn't bring Pokemon up to the 8th or 9th generation, but rather up to the 6th. I know it's not bad at all, but it still fails in that aspect. And for those who were wondering, the game is completely in Spanish, which I think makes it quite worth trying, as it is an adventure that does not go unnoticed in the world of Pokemon. Doing the usual recount, the title brings new regions, Pokemon up to the 6th generation, mega evolutions, 5th generation style graphics, and is completely in Spanish and English. If you are from either of the 2 audiences, I invite you to try Pokemon Said, and without much more to say, let's move on to the next title of today's video. Remember that all the information about the games is on my Discord channel, so remember to check it out. In the number 5 spot, we have Pokemon Theta Renoval Red. This title uses Pokemon Fire Red as its base game, and unlike the other games in the stock, this one includes Pokemon up to the 9th generation, besides also including several game modes, as we can choose between normal mode or a random mode, which in that aspect is really incredible. Another thing that makes the game stand out quite a bit as one of the best in its category is that it features Mega Evolutions, Gigamax form, and Z moves. By using Pokemon Fire Red as the main base, the adventure is quite similar, except that this game includes many more events in this adventure to make it much more entertaining. I think the only negative points about this game are that it is only 40% in Spanish and obviously 100% in English. Although it's not that bad, since the game is very similar to Pokemon Fire Red, so it's not so necessary to know what happens in the story, this if you don't know English up to a certain point. And another really negative point is that graphically it leaves a lot to be desired, since they are the same graphics as Pokemon Fire Red without any modification, but in my opinion, everything else is completely excellent. And I think this title is very well stocked, so let's do the usual count. We realize that the game features Pokemon up to the 9th generation, several game modes, Mega Evolutions, Gigamax forms, and Z moves, and an adventure that is 40% in Spanish. So, without much more to add, let's move on to the next title of today's video. In the number 4 spot, I present to you Pokemon Dark Worship. This ROM hack, in my opinion, is really good since it is mainly completely in Spanish and brings a quite innovative and entertaining story. It is also completely in English, by the way, which, along with Pokemon up to the 8th generation and regional forms specific to the region, and it also adds most of the forms, makes the adventure really addictive. It features a new region and a quite well developed and easy to understand story. Another really important thing is that it features Mega Evolutions, Gigamax forms, and Z-moves. It is one of the few Pokemon games that includes a side quest section. And besides this, something I didn't mention earlier, it brings a new team that will seek to capture a kind of sacred Pokemon in the region. All this will happen while you try to become the champion of the Pokemon League of this new region called Sifu. I think there is no need to mention the things it has, since in my opinion, it is one of the best Pokemon games, and I consider it a perfect Pokemon ROM hack, but I will mention them anyway. It brings a new story, Pokemon up to the 8th generation, a new region, Mega Evolutions, Gigamax form, and Z-moves. It is completely in Spanish, and it also brings a new villain team. I highly recommend you try this title, as it is complete madness from beginning to end. So, without much more to say, let's move on to the number 3 spot of today's video. In the number 3 spot, we have Pokemon Ronan Bang Likely Radical Red. Since I wanted to add a little spice to the video, I bring you this Pokemon title. This game uses Pokemon Emerald as its main base, and is not a game that adds many things itself, but what it does add is a great difficulty since, well, I assure you that it could easily enter a talk of the most complicated Pokemon ROM hacks, and in my opinion, it is the most complicated Pokemon ROM hacks of all time. The difficulty of this game is such that it is often unfair to players. Just mentioning that the first 2 gyms feature legendaries is because you know this adventure will be a real challenge. In general, all the Pokemon of the rival trainers are much better than the ones we can access, since we as players do not have access to a large number of specific Pokemon that would be quite useful for the trainers will have really interesting items, moves, and stats, much better than yours. Plus, the title works with an artificial intelligence that doesn't usually forgive you the slightest mistake. The only really interesting advantage, and the main reason why I highly recommend it, is that when you start the game, you are given infinite rare candies, allowing you to level up your Pokemon with great ease and leave the adventure only for battling against the trainers. And another really important thing is that the store will have access to all kinds of upgrades and moves for your Pokemon. This allows you to be more prepared for your next battles, so you will really need a lot of intelligence and great planning to manage to advance in the adventure. And finally, the icing on the cake is that you cannot level up your Pokemon to a level higher than the strongest Pokemon. This will really lead you to appreciate all kinds of statistics in your Pokemon, whether it's their HP, their moves, or their ability to withstand hits. Your best weapon in this game will be your mind and your strategy, since you won't have many other options. Honestly, a highly recommended game to spend a good time in these last Christmas dates, and a very good game to test your versatility by making all kinds of decisions. So, without much more playing, let's move on to the number 2 spot of today's video. In the number 2 spot, I bring you Pokemon Brillo Púrpura Purple Shine. To begin with, it features a new region and a completely new and interesting story. I love this Pokemon ROM hack for its simplicity, as it is a game you can play anytime, and it's quite likely that you won't get bored. The game is so simple that it includes Pokemon from the 1st to the 3rd generation. Its graphics are really simple and well crafted, but what really shines in this game is its story, as you can see the work and affection they put into the title. Besides that, its story brings a quite interesting DLC, and I think the best part of all is that it is completely in Spanish, although you can also play it in English, but it's your decision. So I totally recommend it. So without much more to say, let's move on to the number 1 spot of today's video. In the number 1 spot, I have Pokemon Roll. This Pokemon game uses Pokemon Emerald as its base and brings us really good things, but above all, curious things. To start, the game features Pokemon from the 1st to the 8th generation, which I see as quite good and excellent. We know the game uses Pokemon Emerald as its main base, but it is not Pokemon Emerald, since new areas were enabled in the Hoenn region in this game, allowing you to continue exploring the adventure through new areas and discover the new secrets that were added in the Hoenn region. And if that's not enough for you, it doesn't matter, since we will also have the Kanto region fully available and some archipelagos of Johto. It has a quite notable graphical improvement, and as if that weren't enough, it brings several difficulty modes, so depending on your experience, you can choose the mode you want to play. But here starts the good and interesting part, since this game is open world, just as you hear it, an open world Pokemon game. What happens is that at the beginning of the adventure, you can choose the city where you want to start. Not counting that you can also choose to have a completely random starter Pokemon. A complete barbarity if you ask me. And not content with all the content mentioned above, it also features the famous Mega Evolutions. This game brings everything and has been one of the best Pokemon games I have ever tried to date. So, without much more to say, let's move on to saying goodbye to today's video. Remember that all the information about the games is on my Discord, so go there right away. Also remember to subscribe and leave your like to continue supporting me and continue growing as a Pokemon content creator. I am Blake and I say goodbye with a until next time.